This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news, explosive testimony by the former acting attorney general regarding President Trump's first national security advisor. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Sally Yates telling Congress that she alerted the White House that General Michael Flynn could be blackmailed by the Kremlin.
General Flynn was compromised with respect to the Russians.
President Trump predictably responding to her sworn testimony with a tweet storm. We're going to report on all that, but I want to begin with CNN's justice correspondent Pamela Brown. Pamela, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. The former acting attorney general Sally Yates says that she warned the White House that the former national security advisor Michael Flynn could be blackmailed by the Russians. Listen to this.
The Russians also knew about what General Flynn had done, and the Russians also knew that General Flynn had misled the vice president and others. Not only did we believe that the Russians knew this, but that they likely had proof of this information. And that created a compromise situation, a situation where the national security advisor essentially could be blackmailed by the Russians.
So, having listened to that, Pamela, break down some of what we heard today from Sally Yates and from the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper.
Well, she really laid out the chain of events, Don. She revealed for the first time that she discussed Michael Flynn with White House counsel Don McGahn on 3 separate occasions, starting 2 days after the FBI interviewed Flynn. She said she initially called Don McGahn to express the concern that Flynn could be blackmailed by the Russians, and she wanted to visit him at the White House in a secure location. And so when she met with him, she explained to him that she was concerned that Flynn could be blackmailed because he had discussed sanctions with the Russian ambassador, but lied about it to top White House officials, including the vice president, who, as we know, went on television denying Flynn had ever discussed sanctions. And then she said the second time they met was the next day when McGahn had several questions, including whether Flynn could be criminally prosecuted. And there was a third conversation about allowing White House officials to see the underlying evidence of Flynn's behavior. Now, James Clapper, on the other hand, he stood by that earlier assertion that he had seen no evidence of collusion between Trump campaign associates and Russians, but he also acknowledged that he was unaware of the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into that matter, Don.
So, Pamela, I know that this stood out to you today. That Sally Yates says that she offered the White House the opportunity to look at the classified information she was basing this warning on, but it's unclear if that happened, right?
Right. So we reached out to the White House to find out, and we're waiting to hear back. Now, Sally Yates said that Don McGahn, White House counsel, asked to see the underlying evidence, and then she called him back to tell him that that would be okay. They worked out the logistics, but she says she doesn't know if it actually happened because she was fired that evening by President Trump for not backing his travel ban. But the fact that White House officials had this opportunity to look at the classified materials, prompting the concern at DOJ, undercuts White House spokesman Sean Spicer's assertion that DOJ only gave a mere heads up. And it also compounds the question, or raises that question, why it took 18 days for the White House to take action against Flynn, only after a Washington Post report revealing that DOJ warning to White House officials, Don.
All right. Thank you, Pamela Brown. I appreciate that. I want to bring in now John Dean. John Dean is the former White House counsel for President Richard Nixon, and he's also the author of Conservatives Without Conscience. Good evening to you, Mr. Dean. Thank you so much for joining us. What did you think of the hearing today?
Well, you know, there was more detail we received. We knew about the meeting. We knew that the warning had come in earlier. And this is just further evidence this White House is not inclined to really deal with this issue. What they keep doing is just stalling, stonewalling, if you will. The tweets are not responsive, and he could clear all this up so quickly, Don, if he wanted to. That's why everyone thinks there's something there, is the way he's responding to it and dealing with it.
How could he clear it up so quickly?
Well, he could say, listen, anybody on my staff who's even hinted at being involved in this will testify in front of any forum, any grand jury, talk to any FBI agent. All documents will be made available if there are any documents. Explain what happened to Flynn, why they didn't move faster, why it took a leak in the Washington Post. I mean, respond, react to these things, rather than just try to make them go away and divert attention.
And by not doing that, you say it gives the impression, at least, that there is something to hide.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It is cover-up 101.
Yeah. You have served in the role as White House counsel to Nixon. You served during Watergate. And I want to get your reaction to something the White House counsel Don McGahn asked Sally Yates in one of their meetings, according to Sally Yates. Listen to this.
One of the questions that Mr. McGahn asked me when I went back over the second day was essentially, why does it matter to DOJ if one White House official lies to another White House official? And so we explained to him it was a whole lot more than that, and went back over the same concerns that we had raised with them the prior day, that the concern first about the underlying conduct itself, that he had lied to the vice president and others, the American public had been misled, and then importantly, that every time this lie was repeated, and the misrepresentations were getting more and more specific as they were coming out, every time that happened, it increased the compromise.
Okay, so according to her, White House counsel Don McGahn asked, why would the DOJ be concerned if one White House official lied to another? Is that the right question to be asking?
Well, it's an odd question. It looks like he was searching for what the underlying crime or activity or interest of the Justice Department was in a poorly phrased question, if that's the way it came in. But not being privy to the conversation, we don't really know. That's her best memory of it, the way the conversation started anyway. And it sounds like he was probing to find out how serious they were. Had he lied to the FBI? She didn't get any responses to that. And where this thing might go. And all she was doing was trying to alert them to the fact that there is a problem here. You have somebody who is dissembling apparently to your staff, and the vice president in turn is taking that information and making it public.
Yeah. If you were getting, in your role, if you were getting a red flag like this from the acting attorney general about the national security advisor, what would you do with that information?
Well, I vetted a lot of people. We had trouble with Watergate, but we didn't have any trouble with our vetting, and they were very thorough, and we reacted to this sort of thing. Nixon was something of a stickler on these kinds of issues. These small things were big things to him. He was somebody who wanted all of his staff to be clean as a whistle, notwithstanding the criminality that later occurred with Watergate, conflict of interest, ethics violations and things like that. They were few and far between in the Nixon White House because of the process that we followed.
Do you believe Michael Flynn could be prosecuted, Mr. Dean?
Well, that question indirectly came up today. A couple senators asked questions that were probing as to whether there was a criminal investigation going on and whether he had committed various crimes, lying to the FBI, and whether he had committed a crime for taking money from Russia as an ex-officer without getting clearance. And they went through the whole litany. So she didn't answer directly, but there certainly appears like there's a prima facie case here. This man's entitled to due process. We shouldn't convict him in the court of public opinion. We don't have all the facts. We don't know his side of the story, but it certainly looks like a crime, or crimes, if you will.
If you were talking about transparency, and you said that the president could clear this up, right away if he put everyone out there involved and said, we have nothing to hide. So my question is he getting sound advice from his counsel based on everything we heard today? And would it help if he even just admitted that Russians influenced the election? Because he won't even admit that.
That would be a wonderful first start. Why he keeps stiffing this issue and refusing to accept it is something of a mystery. What he could do is what Gerald Ford did, or when he took over, or the way Jimmy Carter handled scandals during his presidency, and that was to open the doors, say, come and talk to anybody on my staff, put them under oath if necessary, and cooperate. So Trump is just doing the opposite, and he's doing, I don't know who's advising him on these things, or if anybody.
You think he's getting good advice?
I don't think he is. I don't. His counsel is a campaign law specialist, but he has built a very strong office. The White House counsel's office has some very good lawyers, people who left much higher paying jobs to go into government, and they didn't do it to get themselves in trouble in that White House. So there are people in there who know what to do in these situations. So hopefully he draws on the best of them to get his advice.
So then what does that say about, you said that they didn't go there to, what did you say, to do anything that
Get
was
in
wrong,
trouble.
to get in trouble? Okay,
No.
so then what does that say about them? They're not.
Well, it may be that the way the White House counsel has always been something of a middle-level staff person. Only rarely have White House counsel had direct access to the president. They had to go through the chief of staff or some other staffing system. And that may be the case here, that these people who know what to do are not being called on, and they're not able to get their ideas into the president through the staffing system. I don't know what's happening. This White House, we still know little about. I just know from the announcements that have been made that they've put together a very strong office for the White House counsel's office.
But could it be that they know something that, you know, maybe that they don't?
Well, that's the question. The way he's handling it, the way he handles everything, is to deny, to say it's all fake news. Anything that's bad news is not to be believed. And I just think that's the wrong way. You're not going to make this go away by denials that are conspicuously off the mark. Yeah. So it's just odd, Don, the way to try to make it go away.
There is I know you are, but what am I aspect to the way this White House conducts itself when it comes to these matters. Thank you, Mr. Dean. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.
When we come right back, why Sally Yates says the problems with Flynn went way beyond lying to the vice president.